Great. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on building a sustainable brand print quality program. Our two presenters today include Cindy Cooperman and Ross Mula. Cindy and Ross are a part of X-Rite Pantone's brand team. This team is dedicated to working with brand CPG design teams to help them specify and manage color in a packaging supply chain. I'm Robert Grotans, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Just a few quick things to go over before I turn it over to them. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have any questions, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel, and we will have time at the end of this webinar to answer a few of your questions. Finally, this webinar will be recorded, and you'll receive a link so that you can review this webinar again at your convenience. So with that, I will turn it over to Cindy to get things started.
Good morning, and thank you, Robert, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Today we're going to be discussing how to build a sustainable print quality program for brand packaging. Getting color right on brand packaging may sound simple and straightforward, but many of you who've been charged with the task soon discover that there is actually a lot more than meets the eye when you start working with brand packaging. It's important to understand why color is so important when it comes to packaging. And it's important simply because it connects people to a brand in many ways. It connects to the product line itself. It allows for things like line extension while building on the equity of the core brand identity. And Coca-Cola is a master of this. Color is naturally extended to the wall of color that many are trying to achieve. It's very powerful in the retail environment. It's so powerful that even from a very blurred image, color is what allows me to know exactly where the Diet Coke can be found or where another alternative begins and ends on the shelf. Simpler Wines is another interesting product that was introduced recently in the past few years at Trader Joe's. A seemingly simple product is actually complex. We see the same color produced in three different ways. You have the can, the carton, and the corrugated case it comes in, and is used as an end cap display. So they picked a fairly challenging color to try and reproduce this across multiple materials. Now, I know I've got a color bias. The simple use of this soft teal color for the white sparkling wine really captures the simplicity and freshness that's being communicated to the consumer. And it creates a very effective response in me. The challenge is getting that same soft teal on all three materials that are being used to represent the product. And this is where technique in what we call color harmonization comes in. And also, how do we reproduce it across these different materials or substrates or pack types? It is possible rather, to improve this color mismatch using different digital color techniques. Here's another example with classic rounds. They have a classic red problem. I saw this one on the shelf at my local Kroger, and I can only imagine the heartburn that it's been causing the design team or caused them. There's a lot of effort and expense by brands like yourselves and your suppliers to build processes and protocols to standardize quality results in consumer packaged goods. And so when a company and their design team invest as much resources, research, and effort as they do creating the right look of their product, it's pretty important to make sure that the design intent is realized in the final product every time and everywhere it appears, even if there are revisions and updates to the pack shots, like there is in this particular example. Color quality problems persist despite all that investment in getting it right. And many of you are already using color tools like visual standards, assessments, proofs. So why do these issues still persist on the shelf? The good news is this is presentable and it's not as complicated as you might think. We're going to take a moment now, and Robert's going to put up a polling question. We'd like to ask you guys a few questions as we go through.
Yeah, so I have the first polling question on screen now. So if you'd like to take a moment, in your packaging design process today, how do you view color management? 1, It starts in design, and our suppliers manage the end result. Starts in design, and we manage our suppliers to get the end result. It's fluid, and it gets locked in when it's closer to production or you're not sure. I'll leave that up for a few more seconds, and then we will move on. Looks like we're getting some great responses, a mix of everything, actually. All right, I will go ahead and proceed to close that and turn it back over to Cindy.
Thanks, Robert. Raf, can you share with us where color and packaging process can go right, and maybe a few places where we typically see it go wrong?
Absolutely, and thank you, Cindy, and hello, everybody. As you can see on screen, we do frequently see, and all too often see, instances where we are presented, or you are presented, with this particular kind of challenge. If you have a look on the left-hand side, you'll see that the intended representation of the product is vibrant, it's bright, it's sunshine, it's yellow. However, in reality, the product as delivered to customer or delivered to shelf tends to look a little bit more like the one on the right-hand side. So the execution, the physical realization of what's been done, doesn't really match either the intention, or in this case, the visuals that were put together by the design team. And really our role is to help you as designers, as brand and as marketeers, to come up with the best ways of ensuring that what's in your intention is actually produced in reality and is what is delivered out to your customer base. Thank you. And frequently, we've coined a term, we call it the roundabout. Frequently what happens is a design will be delivered to production. Production will make some changes based on what they assume, or maybe based on past history, or maybe based on their current capabilities. And that goes back to design. Design say, no, wait a minute, that's not what we want. And this generates what's called a waste, we call it a waste roundabout, because you can lose a lot of time, you can lose a lot of effort, you can lose a lot of energy in this particular cycle and still get no further forward. So what we do as part of the brand team is to support our customers to ensure that this roundabout is as small and as painless as possible. We do that by a mix of different tools, and some of those most important tools within that are really starting to move away from some of the older mechanisms of communicating color and really starting to use digital communication for color specification. And you'll hear the terminology I'm using, because once we move into a digital world, we can specify color much more clearly and much more precisely, and in terms that your suppliers and supply chain will understand, because we're not having to rely on what can be quite vague descriptions, or what can be simply reliances upon old and fading physical materials from past production runs. So one of the key elements that we have in getting past this roundabout is the move towards digital color standards. And we've found, or I think I should say, our customers have found this to be a hugely beneficial process. It really does help speed up both the communication, but it also helps to ensure that the communication is very clearly specified and able to be delivered upon. Okay. And once we move into a world of digital color, once we have the ability to describe and convey our colour targets, our colour intent and requirements in terms of numbers, then that gives us a real opportunity. And that's a real opportunity to do two things. One, the first of those, is to have our suppliers measure and validate against those colour standards. And the second of those opportunities is that means it's much easier to report on their ability to hit those colour standards and to give real data back on how good the quality is. If I just go back to the first part, for instance, once you have the ability to define your colours as numbers, then when you pass those to the suppliers can then measure against those numbers in an objective fashion. So whether or not they are close enough becomes a matter of specification. We don't have to rely on people saying, well, I thought it was close enough and it looks okay to me. The subjectivity goes out of the conversation and the objectivity comes in. That means you are able to get much better precision, and you're able to get much better precision across multiple printers, multiple processes, and of course multiple locations, because now we are measuring objectively, we're measuring in the same fashion, and this is all part of what a brand program delivers. Of course, asking someone in your supply chain to measure is a really, really good first step. What we've found is that to really cement that benefit, to really ensure that that message is being carried out as per instruction, that reporting, having suppliers report back on that process is a crucial step also. When a supplier takes a measurement, okay, it's great that they've done so, but the ability now to share that measurement back to yourselves, back to a brand team, back to you as the printer's customer is also crucial. It brings two things. It brings visibility into colour performance to yourselves, but it also brings a level of additional scrutiny for the printer. And as anybody knows, once a process is being watched and looked at, then the process tends to improve significantly and usually quite rapidly. So measuring and looking and reporting back on the data are also key parts of a successful brand program. And what that means is a brand program should be able to deliver this. Okay? What you see is consistent colour. However, we do know that if not properly executed or if not implemented, and let's be clear and let's be fair, many people have worked on brand programs, many people have started brand programs and maybe not been able to carry them through to fruition, or possibly not had the support to get the right traction with their supply chain. Okay, too often print quality programs still may not deliver what is required, the consistency, unless they are properly thought through, implemented and reported on. And one of the key things that X-Rite has developed over the last probably 3 to 4 years is the infrastructure and the brand team framework to allow successful implementation. So it's not simply casting information into the void, but it's actually putting out an infrastructure that allows your suppliers to be comfortable with what's required of them, but also allows them to report data successfully and simply so it doesn't add a burden to their overheads. And really then the 4 pillars of that successful brand program I'm actually going to start at 6 o'clock at the bottom. Digital color standards, which then gives you that confidence in communication. We particularly specialize in achievable digital color standards. So color standards based in reality, which helps to bridge that gap between expectation and delivery. Because the color standards are digital, again, it means that they're available across a variety of platforms, across a variety of countries. Of course, they're hosted in the cloud, so they can be accessed globally. And again, they're available in multiple different pieces of software. So digital standards we can publish through platforms as diverse as Illustrator. They can go to RIPs for accurate inkjet color proofing, so we get accurate color proofs before we get to the printing stage. And of course, they can go directly to the software and instrumentation that the printers themselves are using. So we have a really good handle and a good capability to deliver that appropriate data to the people that need it in every step of the chain. And then you see the next two pillars of a good print quality ecosystem are measurement. So people are not guessing about color. People are not assuming about color. People are not relying simply on their own judgment. They are measuring and determining accurately whether a color is sufficiently good enough. And running right alongside that measurement piece is the software to capture that data. Now, capturing that data has, of course, benefits for anybody in a brand because it gives traceability, but it also has huge benefits for the printers, the suppliers themselves, because they will use that data to analyze their own performance, to understand what's taking them the most time to get right, to understand what's most likely to lead to rejection. And most of the printers that adopt this software will graduate to using it for their own benefit and to improve their own production procedures. And then lastly, sitting on top of all of that is the scorecard reporting. And the scorecard reporting really does close that loop back. It gives you the ability to see the quality that's being produced on your behalf. It gives printers the ability to see the quality that they are producing on your behalf. And of course, it's recorded in a very simple to understand dashboard format. So it's not full of unwieldy technical terms. It's really presented in a very simple fashion. The detail is there underneath if anybody cares to go and look into it further, but it gives you and your teams a ready way to understand the quality of what's being delivered. With that, thank you. I think we're now going to go to another polling question.
Yep. So I will display that now. So for the second polling question, we would just like to know, how is your packaging color managed today? Design and quality teams work together to get the right result. Design teams manage the process internally. Design teams use external partners to manage color, or is it something else? I'll leave that up for about 10 more seconds and then we will move on. Perfect, thank you. I will now close the poll and I think it's going back over to Cindy.
Hi, thanks, Robert. So as Raf was discussing, the technology itself that goes into a successful print quality program is very important. And it is one of the four factors that you need to consider if you want to move into creating a print quality program for your packaging. There's three other elements that are very important to consider, and I wanted to take a minute just to discuss what those are. Number two on the list is looking at the regional and global support that you have in place for your printers or your print suppliers. And so it's important to look at the footprint and where they are globally, because they will require support as they transition into a digital or as you connect to digital that they may already have in place. So you want to partner and create an infrastructure where you can leverage existing training, consulting, knowledge, things like scalable e-learning. So how do you support those printers and get them up and going so that they can get into this connected workflow that we're talking about? The third factor would be looking at what kind of an ecosystem do you want to have in place, and there's different needs and for different types of brands, and a lot of times it depends on things like your color criticality, for instance. There could be some projects where the color of a new brand launch, for instance, a new packaging design, is very critical, and you want to have a very high level of control on that part of your supply chain, or perhaps it's an area where you've been having challenges and you need to rein it in. So you want to look at the pros and cons of both a controlled or an open type of an ecosystem, and there's really benefits to doing both, and that's something that our team could sit down and work with you to understand, which one actually would be more beneficial for you. And that fourth important factor is, how do you get the printers on board? Where do you start? And so the fourth element that you should look at is, what is a proven and standardized way of onboarding them and the process itself that you put in place. And so one of the things that we hold very important when we're working with someone to put in place a print quality program is to look at what is industry best practice? What are the standards out there? And the standards could be different based on the type of manufacturing. It could be different based on the region, or you may want something more general and uniform. So this is the sort of thing that we can help work with different design teams on to understand where their priorities are, and then how do we take that and implement it in a way that is incremental to what a printer is doing today. And that's really how you get the best traction when we talk about implementing not just a successful, but a sustainable one over time, is one that can be incorporated into what the printers are doing, and add that value and bring that visibility that you need in order to get the right quality level. So, why does all of this matter? Why does print quality matter? And how does an ecosystem and a process for doing print quality impact you? Well, first and foremost, it's really about getting those real-time reported results. When you implement a digital workflow for print quality, now you're shifting from a reactive way of looking at print quality. Instead of waiting till it hits the shelf or getting those samples a few weeks later, you can get the data and the results right away, and so that you can see them and work with your suppliers in real time so that it's actionable. There is impact on sustainability issues or initiatives rather. A really simple way to think about this, I mean, I guess in these times, we're not flying around perhaps as much to go do on press checks, but there still is a lot of shipping of samples and whatnot going around. Well, if you can achieve that knowledge and that comfort and that trust with your supplier using a digital tool, then you can immediately reduce some of those shipping costs and waste that can happen in a print quality program. It matters because simplifying metrics gets to action sooner, and that's really some of the benefits of dashboarding in a smart way. Again, so that it's not data overload, but things that you can make meaningful decisions with. And it matters because you want to create visibility and draw evidence-based conclusions. So let's take the subjectivity out of print quality and move more into an objective measurement of it. So if you want to learn more, we're happy to connect with you, or you can also go to our website. We have a dedicated page on the xrite.com website under Industry Solutions. You'll see there is a section dedicated to consumer packaged goods, where we have a lot of resources there that are available to help you along your journey with brand color. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Robert. Thank you for joining us today.
Great, thank you. So we are running up against time, but we do have some time for a few questions. So if you would like to submit a question, feel free to do so now, and I can read those out to Cindy and Roth. While we wait for questions to come in, I am going to launch one more polling question. If you are interested in talking to someone more about what was presented, feel free to answer this, and we will certainly get you in touch with someone. So I see one question here, and I'll try to interpret this. So I think this person is talking about some of the examples you've shown. So for Pantone colors, this seems to look great, but what about CMYK backgrounds?
Okay, Robert, if I can briefly answer that. A really interesting question, and of course, yes, control of CMYK for many products, of course, depending upon your design type, is just as important, if not more important, than control of spot colors. And again, that's where the idea of measurement and reporting comes in. Probably one of the only realistic ways to control how color is represented by 4-color process is to ensure that it is measured against the proper targets with control over things like dot gain or TVI, so you can see how that print and how changes in the ink quality translate into changes in your image. There are well-established ways of doing this by measurement, and part of our programs, again, dependent upon brand, design, and range, but many of our programs include the measurement of CMYK and CMYK elements like dot gain as a central part of the quality program going forward.
Perfect. Another question we have here is, do you recommend one ink supplier across multiple vehicles, such as folding carton, flexible, and corrugated?
Again, I'll take that. Rather than saying just simply what we recommend, let me share what we've found as a practice. Some companies with a limited number of suppliers have adopted that route. However, for most companies, that's not really practical. It's certainly not necessary in order to achieve good color quality. The key to achieving that quality is choosing the correct color standards, appropriate color standards, and then having the visibility to report on them. Some people have looked at that, singling suppliers as a way of trying to reduce the variables. Again, it's valid, but more difficult to do in an extended supply chain. But it's certainly not necessary. So most of the programs that we work with include multiple ink suppliers, and when I say multiple, I'm probably talking maybe 6, 7, 8 different print suppliers. That decision is usually left to the printer. As long as the resulting colors comply with the targets that are set, it's really not a problem.
Perfect. I'll take one more question here. This one might be just a good general one to bring it all back together and to end on. What is the color impact on packaging design?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if you were going to jump on that one, Cindy.
I can jump on it. Maybe we both answer. So I think the impact on packaging brand design is very significant. And I think it's measured in different ways. And when I say measured, I mean, certainly the color itself is one aspect of it. But the ones that I think are really important are overall consumer engagement. Really, how is the end user, that consumer, engaging with the product, and are they getting that original design intent that you put out there? Are you connecting with the consumer in a meaningful way, and is it getting on that package the way you originally were envisioning that engagement when you were putting the package together? And Raf, do you want to add your thoughts?
Just very quickly, I agree with you completely, and I think the reality is, and there are a number of studies that have looked at this. People now tend to judge the quality of a product and of a brand very much by the quality of the packaging, which is what they are presented with. So if color is consistent, if color is harmonious, and if color is as expected in terms of brand consistency, then the experience, they assume or they attribute that level of quality to the product and the brand itself. If, on the other hand, the color presentation is mismatched, all over the place and generally not very good, and that tends to similarly impact on people's perception of the quality of materials. And that's true, so much so that we actually, this is a number of years ago, we actually worked with a brand in retail that wanted to position their materials as basic, very, very, very low cost element of the range, and they went out of their way to try and ensure that there was a level of variation as a way of underlining that. So very interesting, the psychology of it, but it's certainly a very, very, very big impact in how people perceive the goods that they are getting.
Great. Thank you, Raf and Cindy. So we'll end here for today. We're just at our time. If we didn't get to your question, I can certainly get those for Cindy and Raf, and we'll do our best to get you an answer and follow up with you. Again, a couple people asked about the recording. It will go out tomorrow. So I'd like to just say thanks everyone for joining today. Thank you, Raf and Cindy, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, everyone.